"We're exhausted from your sister's vacation, so we can't make your graduation," Mom texted. I replied, "No problem, rest up." They had no clue I was Harvard's valedictorian until my speech aired, and the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Can you imagine getting a text from your own parents, just days before your graduation, saying they were simply too tired to come? Now, imagine that graduation was Harvard, and you weren't just attending, you were the valedictorian. My parents sent that text, and within hours, my commencement speech had gone viral. Reporters were hounding them, asking why their seats were the only ones left empty. Have you ever felt utterly dismissed by the very people who were supposed to lift you up, only for your success to force them to confront everything they'd lost? Because what happened next didn't just change my life, it changed theirs. When I think back to my childhood, it's not laughter or chaos that fills my memories, but a profound silence that followed every celebration that wasn't about my sister. We grew up in a small town in Indiana, a place where everyone knew everyone, and your worth was often measured by how proudly your parents spoke of you. For the hearts, that pride had a name, Chloe. My little sister. The golden one. She was pure sunshine, effortlessly drawing attention, while I, the older one, was always just the afterthought. The quiet presence introduced with a single, echoing line, "This is Vanessa, Chloe's sister." That sentence became my label, the footnote to someone else's vibrant story. I still remember my 10th birthday, vividly. Not because it was special for me, but because it was the day I truly understood how invisible I'd become. Our living room was smothered in pink and gold balloons, but they weren't for me. Mom had ordered a cake that read, "Congratulations, Chloe," in thick, white frosting. My sister had won her first dance competition the week before. I stood beside it, smiling for pictures that were never mine, holding a slice of cake with my name, Isabel, misspelled on the napkin. When I timidly asked if we could maybe light some candles for my birthday, Mom just said, "Oh, honey, we already have all this set up. Let's not make it complicated." So, I clapped for Chloe, just like everyone else. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the confetti swept away, my gift sat on the table, an unused notebook from Dad's office, the kind he got free at work conferences. On the cover, in tiny print, it read, "Midwest Accounting Expo 2006. That night, while Chloe slept surrounded by new pink trophies, I opened that notebook and began to write. It was my first act of rebellion, pouring out everything I couldn't say out loud. Chloe was 2 years younger than me, but somehow, she always lived 2 steps ahead in everyone's eyes. At school, teachers adored the sweet, confident heart girl. When they realized we were sisters, they'd raise their brows and say, "Really? You two don't look alike," as if that explained everything. Chloe was graceful, easy, the kind of girl who made people love her without trying. I was the one who fixed the Wi-Fi, stayed late to set up the lab, or sat in the back reading manuals for fun. It didn't matter how high my grades were or how often I helped others. When family gathered, conversations always circled back to her, her recital, her new hairstyle, her smile that lit up a room. My name rarely came up unless someone needed help with the DVD player or the Christmas lights. One spring afternoon still sits like a stone in my memory. The local middle school science fair. I'd spent 3 weeks building a model wind turbine from junk shop parts, even painted it shimmering white and silver. When they called my name for first place, the applause felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. I instinctively searched the audience for the faces that mattered most, Mom, Dad, maybe even Chloe. But that row of seats was empty. I kept smiling as the principal shook my hand, camera flashes popping, but inside, I felt a sharp, hollow ache. Later that night, Mom apologized. "Sweetheart, we really wanted to come," she said, avoiding my eyes. "But your sister had her prom fitting, and you know how hard those appointments are to get." Dad nodded, chewing slowly, as if the conversation was already over. I nodded, too. That was the night I learned my achievements could only exist in silence. After that, I stopped expecting to be seen. Instead, I found comfort in hidden victories. Hours in the garage, taking apart old radios, fixing neighbors' lawnmowers. The smell of oil and dust became my favorite perfume. Machines, I discovered, were predictable, fair, never choosing favorites. If something didn't work, there was a reason. If you were patient enough, you could find it and make it right again. Deep down, I wish people worked the same way. Only Grandma Helen ever truly noticed how I shrank. She lived 2 blocks away in a small white house that always smelled of cinnamon and lavender. One evening, after the science fair, she came to find me in the garage, hunched over a radio, hands smeared with grease. She didn't scold me or ask why I wasn't helping Chloe. She just watched for a while, then said softly, "You don't need applause to be valuable, sweetheart. Some of the brightest stars burn quietly where no one looks." I didn't answer, but her words stayed with me, echoing louder than any praise I'd ever received. Over the years, I learned to live in that shadow without letting it crush me. At family dinners, I smiled when Chloe spoke, when Mom boasted about her dance scholarships, or Dad pulled out new photos. I passed the dishes, nodded, and quietly withdrew. I became the calm one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need attention. But while they mistook my silence for weakness, I was collecting something powerful: patience, discipline, and the ability to stand on my own. Every forgotten moment, every unmentioned name, I stored that feeling like energy in a battery. By 17, I had mastered the art of disappearing. I was the quiet, prepared student, always thriving on paper, straight A's, debate club, volunteering. But at home, none of it mattered. It was still Chloe. By then, she was the talk of our small Indiana town. Posters of her dance academy lined grocery store windows. Every conversation with my parents orbited her next recital, her new costume, her bright future in performing arts. I'd stay up late in my room, the hum of my old laptop my only companion, typing essays or tinkering with data. Words and numbers were my languages. They never lied, never shifted affection, never forgot. I loved how logic explained the world, but also how words gave it meaning. In those dark, quiet hours, with Chloe's faint laughter across the hall, something awoke in me. I didn't want to compete anymore. I wanted to understand. One autumn morning during senior year, my AP English teacher, Mr. Lee, announced the state essay competition, The Price of Silence in Modern Society. My pen hovered for a moment before I wrote almost feverishly. I didn't have to think. I just described my world, the quiet dinner table, the unspoken favoritism, the ways people learn to live unseen. I disguised it as social commentary, citing psychology journals, but every sentence was carved from my own life. I expected nothing. Weeks later, Mr. Lee stopped me in the hallway, grinning, holding a letter. "Vanessa," he beamed, "you won first place." A rush of adrenaline. That rare spark of validation. The local paper even called the house that evening. Mom answered, her voice bright, until she realized the story wasn't about Chloe. "Oh, that's nice," she said after hanging up, glancing at me briefly. "But we really can't do an interview this week. We're busy packing for Chloe's competition in Chicago." Dad added, "Good job, sweetheart," without looking up from his tablet. And just like that, the conversation flowed back into Chloe's orbit. I was invisible again. Later, I folded the award letter and slipped it into my drawer. I told myself I didn't need their praise. But my hands trembled, not from anger, but from the crushing realization that no matter how hard I tried, home would never truly see me. That same week, Mr. Lee called me into his classroom. "I've been watching you for 3 years, he said, leaning back. "You think small because they make you feel small, but you don't belong in this town forever, Vanessa." He told me you wanted to recommend me for Ivy League schools. Harvard, Yale, Princeton. The words felt foreign. Harvard? That existed in news articles, not for a girl who fixed Wi-Fi and ate alone. But he handed me a sealed envelope. "A strong letter of recommendation," he said. "Don't let anyone talk you out of applying." That night, I opened my laptop to the Harvard application portal. Each click felt heavier than the last. For the essay, I wrote about building belonging in invisible spaces. It wasn't dramatic, it was honest. How silence could be both a wound and a strength. How the unseen learn to listen deeper, to notice what others overlook. I sent it off and slammed my computer shut, my heart pounding like I'd just shouted for the first time in years. When Grandma heard about my essay, she came over the next afternoon, carrying something wrapped in an old silk scarf. Inside was a small, leather-bound notebook, worn soft with age. "It was mine when I was your age," she said. "I used to write poems here. When life made me feel small, I wrote until I remembered who I was. You should do the same. Write your voice before the world tries to rewrite it for you." I traced the edges of the notebook, the faint scent of cedar and ink. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Not as Chloe's sister, but as someone with her own story to tell. Months later, in the middle of a snowstorm, the letter came. Crimson crest gleaming through the frost. My hands shook as I tore it open on the porch, snowflakes melting into the paper. "Dear Vanessa Hart, it is my pleasure to inform you that you have been accepted to Harvard College." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I stood there, wind cutting my face, but inside, a warmth bloomed. Proof that every quiet hour, every ignored victory, had led here. When I walked inside, Mom was on the phone, laughing about Chloe's new recital costume. I waited, then held out the letter, unable to hide my trembling. "I got in," I whispered. She blinked, paused, then smiled faintly. "Harvard? That's far, isn't it? Are you sure you want to go that far away?" Dad looked up. "You'd have more support if you stayed close to home. Chloe could use your help with applications next year." Their words fell like snow, soft, cold, and heavy. I nodded again, quietly folding the letter, pressing it to my chest. That night, I wrote in Grandma's notebook, "They don't see it yet, but someday they will." I didn't know then that Harvard would be more than a school. It would be the proof I existed beyond their shadow, the beginning of my own story. And even though my family reacted like it was nothing, I could feel the wind changing. Somewhere between the silence and the snow, I had taken my first real step away. The first time I stepped through the gates of Harvard Yard, I felt like I'd crossed into another world. The air was different, crisp, charged with ambition. Amber and rust leaves painted the cobblestone paths. Students hurried, coffee steaming, laughter echoing under Gothic arches. I stood there, suitcase in hand, staring up at Memorial Church's bell tower, whispering, "You made it." But under the excitement, a sharp ache remained. No one from home cared enough to see this. My dorm was in Mather House. My roommate, Maya Patel, was everything I wasn't: outspoken, confident, endlessly curious. She introduced herself before I'd even unpacked, asking about my major, my hometown, my favorite books. We talked until midnight. When I told her I was from a small Indiana town, she smiled. "Then you must have fought hard to get here," she said. I didn't correct her. She had no idea how hard. Harvard life was beautiful and brutal. Mornings smelled of espresso and ink. Nights glowed with laptop screens. I worked part-time at Widener Library to pay for meals my scholarship didn't cover, shelving heavy volumes until the building emptied. The scanner's beep, the rustle of old paper, it became a lullaby of survival. Some nights I'd stay until the guards turned off the lights, then walk back through the fog over the Charles River. My stomach growled often, but I told myself hunger was just another form of discipline. I learned to stretch everything: time, money, energy. Instant ramen, second-hand textbooks, thrift store coats. Maya used to tease me for eating cereal with water when the milk ran out, but she never judged. "You're like iron," she said once, handing me half her sandwich. Bend, but never break. Academically, I pushed myself harder than ever. I joined the Harvard College Women in Tech Club, eventually leading it. I worked as a research assistant under Dean Alvarez, a woman who believed fiercely in the power of inclusion in technology. She became the mentor I never had. Talent means nothing if it isn't shared, she told me, reviewing data sets on healthcare equity. That conversation changed everything. I shifted my focus to using data and AI to improve medical access in low-income communities. For the first time, I wasn't just chasing grades, I was chasing purpose. But success didn't erase the loneliness. Each time I received an award or presented research, I'd glance at the chairs reserved for family. Always empty. The reserved signs fluttered, mocking reminders of who hadn't shown up. I told myself it didn't matter. But when the ceremony ended and other students ran into their parents' arms, that old ache returned. The same ache from the empty seat at the science fair, years ago. Mom's texts were rare, and never about me. Your sister just got back from her trip to Italy. She sent us the prettiest photos. Or, we're so proud of Chloe, she got a mention in the town paper. Never, how are your classes, or we miss you. I used to reply politely, but eventually, I stopped answering. It wasn't bitterness. It was exhaustion. You can only reach for someone so many times before your hands tremble from the weight of disappointment. Still, I built something of my own. Junior year, my team developed a prototype using predictive models to optimize medical supply distribution in rural hospitals. It caught the attention of a Boston nonprofit. When they invited me to present at a symposium, I emailed my parents the details, just in case. The reply, "That's nice, honey. We'll be in Nashville that weekend for Chloe's showcase. Send photos." I didn't bother. But that night, on stage, explaining our algorithm to a panel of professionals, I imagined Grandma in the back, nodding proudly. It was enough. Maya became the closest thing to family. When dorms emptied for winter break, she always insisted I visit her family in New Jersey. You shouldn't spend Christmas alone, she'd say. But I usually stayed in Cambridge, volunteering or taking extra shifts. I told her I preferred the quiet, though the truth was simpler, going home didn't feel like home anymore. Every call felt like dialing another planet. Chloe was thriving, always, new job offers, new admirers, new reasons for my parents to celebrate. During my final year, Dean Alvarez nominated me for the Harvard Innovation and Public Impact Fellowship. When the acceptance letter came, Maya and I screamed so loud the RA came knocking. That night, she lit 2 small candles on the windowsill. One for where you came from, one for where you're going. I watched the wax melt, realizing how much I owed to the people who had shown up in small, quiet ways, the teachers, the mentors, the friends who filled the empty spaces my family left behind. Commencement season rushed forward. I'd been shortlisted to deliver the student speech. A dream I barely dared to whisper. When the confirmation came, valedictorian speaker, I stared at the email, my throat tightening. It felt like everything, every silent dinner, every ignored achievement, every lonely night had led to this. I wanted to tell my parents, to share even a fragment of pride. But then my phone buzzed. A photo from Mom, Chloe on a beach in Santorini, captioned, "Our beautiful girl living her best life." I closed my phone, looking out at the lights flickering across the Charles. In the reflection, I saw myself, tired, older, but still standing. Grandma's words from years ago echoed, "You don't need applause to be valuable," she was right. Maybe they would never come. Maybe that seat would always stay empty. But I was done chasing their gaze. From that moment, I decided I would give my best speech, not for those who never showed up, but for those who did. Because if they wouldn't come to see me, the world would. The email arrived just after midnight, the campus silent except for the whisper of snow. I was revising a research proposal when my laptop pinged, "Congratulations, you have been selected as the 2024 student commencement speaker." I froze. Out of 1,000 seniors, they chose me. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The cursor blinked, steady and alive, as the words sank in. I reread it twice, searching for a mistake, a catch. But it was real. I was the speaker. The girl once forgotten at her own science fair would now stand at the Harvard Yard podium, where presidents, poets, scholars had stood before. Maya burst into my room moments later, having seen my frantic message. "You did it," she yelled, pulling me into a hug. We jumped around our dorm room, laughing breathlessly. "You're going to make them cry," she said. No pressure, though. The next week was a blur. Meetings in the dean's office, surrounded by faculty. They outlined the process, drafts, review sessions, rehearsals at Sanders Theater. My speech would be televised live on Boston 25, streamed nationally. The weight of it settled on me, beautiful, heavy, and a little terrifying. I spent nights hunched over Grandma's old leather notebook, searching for words. I didn't want a perfect speech, I wanted an honest one. I thought of every empty chair I had ever faced, the science fair, the fellowship ceremony, the research showcase, and the ones that would surely be waiting at my graduation. That's when the title came to me, From the Empty Chair to the Open Microphone. The first line followed naturally. When they didn't see us, we learned to see each other. It wasn't just about me. It was about everyone overlooked, underestimated, told they didn't belong. I wrote about the janitor who stayed late, Maya sharing her last sandwich, first-generation students working 2 jobs. Those who built their dreams quietly while the world applauded someone else. During my first rehearsal at Sanders Theater, I stood at the podium, staring out at the empty red velvet seats. My voice echoed faintly. "Good evening," I began, shaking slightly. I used to think silence was my punishment, but now I see it was my training ground. The moment I said it, truth vibrated through me like music. Dean Alvarez, listening from the back row, walked up when I finished. "You're not just speaking for yourself, Vanessa," she said, eyes glinting. "You're speaking for every student who ever felt invisible. That's power. Don't be afraid of it." That night, lying in bed, I wondered if I should tell my parents. A hopeful part still believed, *maybe this time they would show up. Maybe they'd be proud. Maybe they'd even come early, sit in the front row, and finally see me, not as Chloe's shadow, but as the person I was, but as someone who had finally stepped into the light. I opened my phone and started typing, "Hey, I have some news about graduation." Before I could finish, another message arrived from Mom. "Just got Chloe's itinerary. She's going to Paris for a law conference. Can you believe it?" A photo was attached, Chloe posing in an airport lounge, champagne in hand. My fingers froze. I deleted my draft. I knew, deep down, the truth I'd always refused to say aloud: they wouldn't come, even if I asked. They would be too tired, too busy, too far. And I didn't want to give them another chance to choose someone else over me. This time, I wanted the truth to reveal itself without words. So I decided to say nothing. Let the world show them instead. The days leading up to commencement were exhausting, yet exhilarating. Thesis presentations, media interviews, rehearsals. I barely slept. Yet every time I crossed Harvard Yard, that quiet joy bloomed. The journey wasn't just mine, it belonged to every version of me that had once felt small. One afternoon, after a final run-through at Sanders Theater, I stayed behind. The hall was empty, sunlight pouring through stained glass, casting gold streaks across the stage. I stood at the center, staring at the microphone. Simple, almost fragile. Yet it had outlasted centuries of voices. I reached out, tracing its cool surface. From the empty chair to the open mic, I whispered, just to feel the words. Walking out, the campus buzzed with pre-graduation energy. Families toured, students hugged. I passed a bulletin board. A flyer fluttered gently, Harvard Commencement 2024. Student speaker, Vanessa Hart. Below, in small print, live on GBH in Boston 25. I stood there, staring at my own name, printed against crimson. It didn't feel real. For years, I had chased acknowledgement, only to realize the loudest validation came from within. Still, the thought made me smile. A quiet, knowing smile, not for the world, but for the girl who once sat in that cold gymnasium, waiting for her family to show up. That night, I sent Grandma a photo of the flyer. She replied within minutes, *, I knew your voice would find its place. Don't dim it for anyone, *, so, I didn't. I decided I would walk onto that stage, not to prove anything to my parents, not even to Chloe, but to speak for the invisible. To lift those still sitting at empty tables. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't silence. It's being heard. And soon, they would hear me. Whether they meant to or not. 2 weeks before graduation, campus was alive with celebration. Maya and I were pinning tassels to our caps when my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. I almost didn't check. Experience taught me texts from home rarely brought joy. But curiosity won. The message was short, almost mechanical. We're too tired from your sister's trip to attend your graduation, honey. Just got back from Europe with her. Flights were awful. We'll rest this weekend and celebrate properly when we see you next time. Love you. I reread it 3 times, the words blurring, then settling like a cold stone in my chest. Too tired, that was their reason. Not an emergency, not financial strain. Just tired from following Chloe through Europe, where she'd been signing a contract with a prestigious law firm. For a long moment, I didn't move, just stared at the message, my faint reflection on the screen. Maya looked up, sensing the shift. Everything okay? She asked. I nodded once, the smallest smile touching my lips. Yeah, I said softly. Just expected. Then, without hesitation, I typed my reply, rest well. No sarcasm, no confrontation, just 2 words that said everything. Because this time, I didn't feel the urge to explain or beg or pretend it didn't hurt. I'd done all of that before, and still, the chair had always been empty. That night, as the lights of Cambridge flickered, I made a decision, not out of bitterness, but clarity. If they wouldn't show up, I would still make space for those who did. The next morning, I quietly requested 3 family seats from the commencement office. When the coordinator asked if I wanted to use all 3, I smiled faintly. Yes, I said. 1 for my grandmother, 1 for my best friend, and 1 just to stay empty. The woman looked puzzled but nodded, writing the names. Helen Hart, family guest. Maya Patel, friend. For the 3rd seat, she left a blank line. I picked up the pen and wrote in neat handwriting, reserved for who shows up. The next few days were a blur of preparations, but beneath the noise, a stillness grew inside me. Every time I imagined my parents in the crowd, I felt distance, not anger, like remembering someone else's dream. Maya, ever perceptive, brought it up over tea. You sure you're okay with them not coming? She asked. You don't even sound upset. Honestly, Maya, I'm not, I said truthfully. I think I stopped hoping a long time ago. And maybe that's a good thing. Sometimes peace comes when you stop asking people to be who they've shown you they're not. She nodded, her eyes soft. Then let's fill the empty seat with something better. Like what? Flowers, she said. Something beautiful. So we did. The day before graduation, at a small florist off Mass Avenue, thick with the scent of lilac and peonies, I chose white tulips, Grandma's favorite, and a single crimson rose in the middle, the color of Harvard's crest. It wasn't about mourning their absence, it was about honoring presence, the kind that required no applause, no explanation, no perfection. Back at the dorm, I arranged the flowers myself. The next morning, I'd place them on that 3rd seat, a quiet offering, a reminder that even absence can be acknowledged with grace. Graduation morning dawned golden and sharp, too big for disappointment. I slipped into my gown and cap, pinning a small silver brooch, shaped like a book, that Grandma had given me. Maya fussed with her camera, promising to record every second for Grandma and for the archives of poetic justice. When we reached her Centenary Theater, it was alive with color and sound. Hundreds of students in crimson robes, families waving, chatter mingling with the orchestra tuning up. I handed the usher my seating card. He guided me to the family section, 3 seats side by side, bathed in morning light. Grandma arrived just as the bells began to ring, her steps slow but steady, pale blue coat shimmering, cane held like a part of her strength. When she saw the seats, she smiled knowingly. "You left one open," she said. I nodded. "Always." She touched the bouquet gently. "It's perfect," she whispered. "A place for whoever's heart remembers to show up next time." Maya joined us, camera slung. She tucked a tulip behind Grandma's lapel and winked. "Ready to make history?" I laughed softly. Ready to breathe. As I turned toward the stage, I looked back once. Grandma's face glowed. Maya adjusting her lens. And the third seat, empty but not lonely, gleamed with white tulips and that single deep red rose. For the first time, the sight of that chair didn't hurt. It felt symbolic. No longer a reminder of what I lacked, but proof of what I had built. Love that showed up, even from unexpected places. I took a deep breath. The morning of commencement felt like a dream. Bells from Memorial Church echoed. Flags rippled against the blue sky. I stood at the edge of Tercentenary Theater, thousands of chairs stretching across the lawn. This was the sound of endings and beginnings. The orchestra began pomp and circumstance. Around me, classmates whispered goodbyes that felt like promises. Maya gave me a thumbs up. I glanced at the family section, Helen Hart, Maya Patel, and the third seat, crowned with tulips and a rose. The seats for my parents were empty. For a moment, the sight hit me harder than expected. Even knowing, even preparing, it still felt like a tiny fracture, an old bruise I thought had faded. Families hugged, mothers waved, fathers snapped photos. Joyful, proud, messy. And in the center of it all, those empty chairs, still, untouched by the wind. Then, as if to balance the silence, I saw her. Grandma. Slowly, carefully, cane in hand, guided by an usher. Her pale blue coat shimmered. Every few steps, she paused, her free hand brushing each chair she passed, as if blessing them. When she reached me, something inside me unclenched. She smiled, eyes bright. "Today," she said, placing her hand gently over mine, "you are seen." The words landed like a whisper and a thunderclap. I swallowed hard, tears too close. "Thank you for coming," I managed, barely a breath. Her hand lingered. "Of course I came," she said softly. "I wouldn't miss watching the girl they overlooked become the woman they'll never forget." She squeezed my fingers, turned, and took her seat beside the flowers. The crowd settled. The rustle of programs, the murmur of names, the shuffle of robes. I lifted my eyes to the trees. Sunlight filtered through, painting moving patterns on the students. For the first time, I felt entirely present, rooted and free. When my name was announced as student commencement speaker, the world blurred. I stood, thousands of eyes on me. The applause rolled through the yard, rising and falling before settling into silence. I walked slowly toward the podium, the red carpet soft, the air vibrating with expectation. From the stage, the view was breathtaking. The sea of crimson. The family section, shimmering with color. And in the middle, that one empty chair, a quiet declaration. The tulips swayed. Grandma lifted her head, eyes on me. Even from that distance, I could see her mouth something I didn't need to hear aloud. "I see you." A hush fell. The microphone buzzed faintly. I adjusted it, hands surprisingly steady, and looked out. "Good morning," I began, my voice carrying further than I thought it could. "When they didn't see us, we learned to see each other." A ripple moved through the audience, soft, attentive. I spoke about the unseen students, the quiet ones, those who build foundations. For others. I spoke of how belonging wasn't given, it was built, chair by chair, hand by hand. How silence had once been punishment but became my strength. How absence taught me to create presence for others. As I spoke, the sun broke through, pouring light over the stage. It felt like the world was listening. Not just Harvard, but everyone who had ever been made small. May we remember to leave no chair empty for those who come after us, I concluded. Because when the world forgets to see them, we must. The applause began slowly, then swelled, students rising, clapping, cheering, some wiping their eyes. I looked down one last time toward the family seats. Grandma was standing, hands clasped, tears glistening. Maya filmed through blurred vision, laughing and crying. The empty seat remained, flowers trembling. I didn't feel lost anymore. I felt peace. That chair wasn't a symbol of rejection, it was a promise that I'd never forget where I came from or what it took to get here. As the music swelled, caps flew into the sky. For the first time, I joined in, throwing mine high, watching it disappear. The bells of Memorial Church rang again, loud and full. When I stepped down, the world felt lighter. Grandma met me halfway. "You did it," she whispered. They may have been tired, but the world is wide awake now. I smiled through tears. In that moment, I knew the truth she meant. I didn't need their presence to be seen. I was already shining. Completely, and finally, on my own. The podium lights felt warmer than I expected, spilling gold. The air in Intercentenary Theater was still, thousands of breaths held. I took a steady inhale, then glanced toward the family section. Grandma, Maya, and between them, that empty chair, crowned with tulips and a single crimson rose. The sunlight made the petals glow. I let my eyes rest there for a heartbeat before I began. "Good morning," I said softly, my voice echoing, steadier than I felt. If you look closely at the audience today, you might notice something small. Somewhere in this sea of faces, there's an empty chair. A few people shifted, glancing around. I smiled faintly. I used to think an empty chair meant failure, meant no one cared enough to fill it. But over the years, I've learned something different. Sometimes the empty chair is proof that we showed up for ourselves, even when no one else did. The microphone caught every pause, every breath. It didn't feel like performing, it felt like confession. I grew up in a small town where silence was often mistaken for strength. I learned early how to be quiet, how to work hard, how to smile through being overlooked. And when no one sat in the audience, I told myself it didn't matter. But here's the truth. Every time someone chooses not to show up for you, someone else quietly, humbly does. I looked toward the back rows where the janitorial staff stood, still in their blue uniforms, watching. "So today," I said, "I want to begin by thanking the people whose chairs are never empty because they never stopped showing up for others." The applause began softly, faculty first, then students joining, until it filled the yard. "At Harvard, we talk about excellence a lot," I continued. "But no one tells you that excellence often depends on the invisible ones. The friends who share notes. The dining staff who leave a plate aside for you. The librarians who unlock rooms early because they see you waiting. The professors who don't just read your essays, but your silences." I could see Maya filming discreetly, tears welling. Dean Alvarez, near the front, her expression soft but proud. "I came here thinking success was about being chosen," I said. "But what I learned is that success is really about choosing. Choosing persistence over comfort. Choosing to see others when no one saw you. Choosing to stay kind, even when the world gives you every reason not to be." The audience was completely silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. I leaned forward slightly, voice low but clear. "For those of us who grew up believing we didn't have a seat at the table, listen to me, you don't need to wait for one. Build your own." That line, "build your own seat," was the heart of everything. The reason I'd written this speech, the reason I'd survived years of silence and smallness. When you build your own seat, I continued, you stop chasing approval. You stop measuring your worth by who claps for you. You start realizing you were never supposed to fit into someone else's table. You were meant to create your own. And then pull up extra chairs for those still standing. The wind caught the corners of my paper, making them flutter like wings. I pressed them down gently. When they pushed us aside, we learned how to make space. When they spoke over us, we learned how to listen deeply. And when they forgot our names, we carved them ourselves into history. A murmur of agreement. Somewhere in the back, a soft amen. Look around you, I urged. Every person here today was carried by someone unseen. Maybe a mentor, a sibling, a grandmother, a stranger. Maybe it was the version of yourself who refused to quit. Whoever it was, remember them. Remember that they showed up. And when it's your turn, show up for someone else. I paused, then glanced again toward the family section. Camera operators noticed, lenses shifting. A broadcast camera zoomed in, the flowers, the sunlight, Grandma's hand on her cane. She lifted her head, smiling faintly as the camera found her, and for a second, her eyes met mine. That image would go viral later, the valedictorian looking toward her grandmother, an empty chair and a bouquet between them. I looked straight into the lens. To my grandmother, who always said, "You don't need applause to be valuable." Thank you. You showed up. And to anyone sitting in the crowd today, carrying your own kind of empty chair, this moment is for you. Applause thundered. I waited, eyes stinging, then lifted my chin for the final lines. Titles don't define us. Degrees don't define us. What defines us is the courage to build, and the kindness to share what we've built. Because one day, someone will stand where we stand now. And the question won't be what you achieved. It'll be, who did you make room for? I let the silence stretch. May we all remember this, the tables of power are temporary. But the tables of compassion, the ones we build ourselves, last. A standing ovation. Faculty, students, even the choir. Flags waved, caps lifted, cameras swept, turning everything gold. Tulips gleamed. From the corner of my eye, I saw Grandma wipe her cheeks. Later, she'd tell me she whispered, "They see you now." But in that moment, I didn't need confirmation. I felt it. In the roar of the applause, in the rhythm of 1,000 hearts clapping, for survival, for recognition, for every unseen student who had ever dared to take up space. The orchestra began again, slow and reverent. I stepped back. The university president shook my hand. My cap tassel brushed my face as I bowed. And when I turned to walk off stage, the camera caught one last close-up, me, looking over my shoulder at that empty chair. Online, the broadcast clip would loop for days, shared with captions like #BuildYourOwnSeat and #FromSilenceToSpotlight. Students from other universities would share photos of their own ceremonies, notes taped to chairs reading, reserved for who shows up. I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that for the first time, I wasn't proving anything. I was simply being. The sunlight poured through the trees. The air smelled like possibility, warm, clean, infinite. I glanced one last time at Grandma, at Maya, at the chair that once symbolized absence and now somehow, belonging. Then I whispered to myself, not into the mic, but into the wind, "We're seen now," and when I stepped down, the crowd still on their feet, I realized this was never just my story. It was everyone's who had ever learned to build their own seat. When the ceremony ended and the crowd scattered, the air still shimmered with fading applause. I stood at the edge of the stage, clutching my speech, trembling not from nerves, but from release. Years of silence, of being overlooked, had poured out of me in 10 minutes of truth. Maya found me first, running through the gowns, waving her phone like a victory flag. "It's everywhere," she gasped. "Vanessa, they're already clipping it." I frowned, half smiling. "Clipping what?" She turned the screen, the university's live stream replay, my speech already uploaded with the caption, "Build Your Own Seat, Harvard Student Speaker Moves Audience to Tears." The thumbnail froze on me glancing at the empty chair, the flowers gleaming. I hadn't even left the yard before the first notification buzzed on my phone, then another, then a flood. Mentions, messages, tags. At first, I thought it was just classmates, but then I saw the caller ID Mom, then Dad, then Chloe. I stared at the phone as it vibrated in my palm, Mom pulsing like a small heartbeat. I didn't answer. Instead, I muted it and slipped it into my gown pocket. We took photos instead. Maya insisted on every possible angle. Grandma stood between us, clutching my arm. Every few minutes, she'd shake her head. You know, she said, they're never going to stop talking about that speech. I smiled. Maybe not. But I hope they remember why I said it. By evening, the university's social accounts had shared the clip. Boston 25 aired a segment, Harvard valedictorian delivers viral message. The reporter's voice narrated over my image, a subtitle flashing, from an empty chair to a full audience. That's when the texts from Mom started pouring in. Why didn't you tell us? Everyone's asking why we weren't there. You made it sound like we don't care about you. From Dad, we look awful, Vanessa. Couldn't you have warned us? From Chloe, wow. Guess we're the villains now, huh? Next time, maybe loop us in before you go public. I read each message slowly, then placed the phone face down next to my untouched coffee. There was a time those words would have sent me spiraling, rewriting replies in my head, trying to explain myself into being understood. But not today. Today, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Maya, across from me in the cafe, watched quietly. You're not going to respond? She asked. I shook my head. Not now. Today isn't about explaining. It's about graduating. She smiled, understanding completely. Good, she said, because the rest of the world is about to start calling too. She wasn't exaggerating. Within an hour, my inbox overflowed. An email from Harvard Alumni Affairs requesting permission to share my transcript. A message from a TEDx curator, your speech resonated deeply. Would you consider expanding it into a talk? A note from a fellowship program in Geneva, we saw your research on equitable access to healthcare data and your story. Let's discuss opportunities. Each message arrived like a ripple, spreading wider and wider. Professors forwarding it, alumni commenting, classmates tagging me with proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Someone had clipped the line, when they didn't see us, we learned to see each other, and it became a trending hashtag. Through it all, my phone vibrated. Mom calling, then Dad, then Chloe, again. I could almost hear their voices, the edge of panic, the sudden realization that the daughter they dismissed had become a headline they couldn't control. That night, as the campus grew quiet, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a calm so deep it felt unfamiliar. I walked alone through Harvard Yard, the same paths I used to take when I felt invisible. The grass was soft. Dorm windows glowed with students packing. Faint music drifted from a celebration. I found an empty bench under an old elm tree and sat down. Across the way, I could still see the outline of the stage, the faint glimmer of the chairs. I pictured that empty seat again, not as loss, but as freedom. When I finally pulled out my phone, over 100 unread messages. Mom had written again, we saw it on TV. People keep asking if we're proud. Of course, we are. We just wish you'd told us first. For a moment, I let the words sit there. Then I typed, I'm glad you saw it. Today was important to me. And I stopped there. No explanations, no accusations. Just a full stop. Because I realized something simple, peace doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it comes from refusing to reopen the wound. Before heading back to the dorm, I called Grandma. She picked up after one ring, her voice warm and steady. I saw the segment again, she said. They played it twice. Your words, they're echoing everywhere. I didn't mean for it to go that far, I admitted. I know, she said. That's why it did. I smiled into the dark. They've been calling non-stop, I said quietly. Mom, Dad, Chloe. I imagine so, she chuckled softly. Let them call. Let them sit with what they missed. There was a pause, the kind only she knew how to hold. Then she added, you didn't embarrass them, Vanessa. You revealed them. And sometimes truth is the only mirror that can make people finally see. I didn't reply. I just sat, listening to the rustle of leaves, the echo of laughter, and the quiet rhythm of my own breath. The world outside was spinning fast, but inside, everything had slowed. For the first time, I wasn't chasing recognition. I wasn't even chasing understanding. I was simply standing in my own light. The one I built. The one no one could take away. When I hung up, I looked toward the faint lights across the river, their reflections trembling on the water like stars. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Chloe. I let it ring, then fade into silence. Somewhere beyond that silence, a new sound began. The bell from Memorial Church, slow and deliberate, marking the hour. Each toll echoed, a quiet reminder that the day was ending, but the story wasn't. I stood up, tucking the folded speech into my coat pocket. My phone still vibrated faintly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I turned toward the gates, and as I walked into the cool Cambridge night, I whispered to myself the line that had started it all, when they didn't see us, we learned to see each other. This time, I said it not to the crowd, not to the camera, but to the girl I used to be. The one who'd once sat alone at a forgotten table, dreaming of a seat of her own. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall dorm window. My phone had buzzed until nearly dawn, missed calls, unread texts, emails stacked like a rising tide. When I finally opened my eyes, the first message wasn't from a journalist or university official. It was from Mom, we need to talk. This has gone too far. I stared at it for a long moment before unlocking the phone. 5 missed calls from Dad. 2 from Chloe, each with the same tone, frantic, defensive, performative. I could almost hear it, that brittle blend of guilt and pride. Grandma was already awake, sitting at the small table by the window in her hotel robe, reading the newspaper. She had circled my photo on the front page with her pen, Harvard graduate speech on inclusion goes viral. She looked up when the phone buzzed. They're still calling? She asked quietly. I nodded, sliding the phone onto the table. They said I embarrassed them. Grandma folded her paper, adjusted her glasses. Then maybe embarrassment is the only thing that'll make them finally look in the mirror. Her calm gave me courage. I exhaled, picked up the phone, and pressed the call button. Mom's voice burst through, tight and sharp. Vanessa, what on earth were you thinking? Do you know how humiliating this is for us? The neighbors called. The church called. Everyone's asking why we weren't there. You made it sound like we abandoned you. I kept my tone even. You weren't there, Mom. She hesitated, taken aback. That's not fair. We were just tired. I finished for her. From Chloe's trip. I know. Dad's voice cut in from the background, low and tense. You could have told us you were valedictorian, Vanessa. We would have come if we'd known it was that important. I closed my eyes. You mean if it was something you could brag about? Silence. The kind that hums with old truths no one wants to touch. Grandma leaned forward. Robert, she said, her tone firm but calm. You've missed more important things than a title. You missed her growing up, building herself from scratch. And now that the world finally saw her, you act as if she's the one who's done wrong. Dad's breath crackled through the speaker. Mother, you don't understand. We supported both our girls equally. It's just Chloe always needed more attention. She had events, competitions, and Vanessa had none. Because you never showed up to the ones she did, Grandma interrupted, her voice cutting clean. I remember the night she won the state essay award. Do you remember that, Judy? You were busy helping Chloe choose her prom dress. Mom's voice wavered. That was years ago. And yet, Grandma said softly, she remembered it enough to write her own ending. The line went quiet. I could almost hear my parents breathing, cornered not by accusation, but by fact. Dad tried again. We didn't mean to hurt her. We just thought, well, Chloe needed us more. She's always been fragile, you know how she gets. I looked at Grandma, who raised her eyebrows, a faint smirk touching her lips. She didn't even need to say it. Fragile, or favored, Grandma finally spoke aloud what both of us were thinking. Tired, busy, worried about Chloe. Those are the words you've used for 20 years to excuse the same absence. But love doesn't wait for perfect timing, Robert. Love doesn't choose the convenient child. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of traffic. Mom's voice returned, smaller now. You don't understand, Mother. Vanessa was always so independent. We thought she didn't need us. I inhaled sharply, the ache returning to my throat. I didn't need things, Mom. I needed you to show up. That's all. Her breath caught on the line. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Grandma leaned closer to the phone. Judy, I've lived long enough to tell you this, you once told me you raised strong girls. But strength without tenderness isn't pride. It's loneliness. Vanessa learned to be strong because you left her no other choice. Dad sighed, the sound fraying at the edges. We were doing our best, Mother. We worked hard, provided everything. Everything except presents, Grandma said. And that's the one thing a child never stops waiting for. Mom sniffled softly. Maybe we made mistakes, but we didn't deserve to be painted as heartless. I looked out the window, watching students take photos with their families. You weren't painted as anything, I said quietly. You just weren't there. The camera can't capture people who don't show up. Grandma nodded approvingly, her hand resting on my wrist. Mom tried to steady her voice. What do you want us to say, Vanessa? We're proud of you, all right? You've accomplished so much, but this public spectacle could have waited until we were ready. That last word, ready, echoed. Grandma's eyes hardened. Judy, I've lived long enough to tell you this, love doesn't wait until you're ready. It shows up when you're needed. And you weren't there when she needed you most. Now, I could hear the faint click of my father swallowing. What are you saying, Mother? That we're bad parents? No, she said gently. I'm saying you've been absent once. And absence, when repeated enough, becomes a habit people mistake for normal. Mom exhaled shakily. We didn't realize it looked that way. You didn't see, Grandma said. That's the difference. Once free, the silence that followed wasn't angry. It was the silence of truth landing, slow and heavy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. Finally, I said softly, I'm not calling to blame you. I'm calling because I'm done explaining. Dad spoke carefully now. Then why are you calling at all? I glanced at Grandma, who nodded, urging me forward. Because I want to give you one more chance, I said. If you want to hear what I've never said, the truth of what it's been like all these years, come to Cambridge tomorrow evening. Just you, Mom, and Chloe. No guests, no excuses. Just family. Mom hesitated. What do you mean, hear the truth? I mean, I said, you've heard everyone else's version of me. The quiet daughter, the busy one, the one who doesn't need help. It's time you hear mine. The line went quiet. Then Dad cleared his throat. We'll think about it. Grandma's voice came, low and certain. Don't think. Just come. And then she reached across the table and ended the call herself, pressing the red button with a firm, deliberate touch. For a while, neither of us spoke. The quiet between us felt sacred. Finally, Grandma said, "You've given them a door, Vanessa. Whether they walk through it or not, that's on them." I looked at her, my throat tight. "Do you think they'll come?" She smiled faintly, folding her newspaper. "I think shame is heavy, but curiosity is heavier. They'll come. The question is whether they'll finally listen." Outside, the bells of Memorial Church began to toll again. Slow and even, counting down the hours to a conversation 20 years overdue. The next evening, I set a small dinner in my apartment overlooking Harvard Square. The window was cracked, letting in the scent of late spring rain and the hum of street music. On the dark wooden table, a freshly baked loaf of sourdough, a pot of steaming tomato soup, a bowl of arugula salad, a few slices of black pepper cheese. Simple, humble, to keep the night from feeling like a performance. 3 candles flickered. I set 4 bowls, 4 spoons, and deliberately left no empty chair at the table. The only spare seat I kept was in the corner, where I'd hung a small wooden sign, "For who shows up, they arrived a few minutes late." The knock was hesitant, as if lateness could disguise years of absence. My father entered first, quiet, heavy-eyed, followed by my mother, clutching her purse across her chest like a shield. Chloe came last, her coat draped, eyes darting uncertainly around the room. She lingered on the framed photos, the Charles River at dawn, Widener Library glowing, Sanders Theater empty. I gestured for them to sit. We ate the first few bites in silence, the clinking of spoons on porcelain soft and awkward, like the sound of people stepping into a room full of truth. I spoke first, without circling. "The empty chairs have followed me all my life," I began, my voice steady, rehearsed. "In 8th grade at the state science fair, your seats were empty because you were helping Chloe pick a prom dress. During my junior year research award, I looked down at the reserve sign swaying in the cold air, no one sitting there except the janitor, clapping quietly by the door. Even yesterday, I set 1 chair aside, placed flowers on it, and told myself that emptiness is also a kind of presence. At least it's honest. You used to say, 'Good job, honey,' then switch the topic back to Chloe's travel plans, her dress fittings, her new internship. I stopped expecting more. I became the footnote in someone else's headline. The sister of Chloe. I invited you so many times, I said finally, my tone even, not angry. And the chair stayed empty. My father set down his spoon, the sound sharp. His hands tightened, then folded. I didn't see, he said after a long silence. I thought you were fine on your own, that you didn't need me there. The words landed softly, like stones dropped into deep water, ripples, not explosions. My mother looked at me longer than she ever had, eyes glassy but steady. I thought you were strong, she whispered. So strong you didn't need your mother. Chloe always needed so much, she panicked. She stumbled, and I kept rushing to her. Her voice faltered. Grandma's words echoed, love doesn't choose perfect timing. It chooses to show up, I saw my mother realize what she'd just confessed. Chloe had been silent, stirring her spoon. Finally, she looked up. I was jealous of you, she said softly. I blinked. Jealous? Because you could fly without anyone holding you, she said, her voice trembling. At home, everything revolved around me. I never learned how to stand. And watching you, how the world seemed to find you. I was scared. I thought if I admitted you were better, I'd disappear. There was no triumph in me, just a strange stillness, the kind that comes when the past finally stops spinning. We ate slowly. The soup cooled. When the armor of silence had finally melted, I set the boundary as gently as setting the last candle. I'm not ready to forgive, I said. And I don't need to rush it. Forgiveness isn't a check you sign over one dinner. But I'm ready for something new, to practice showing up. Next time, just come. Come 5 minutes early. Text to ask what time it starts. Sit in the back row. Take a blurry picture. Just be there. My father nodded, not bowed, but lifted his chin. I'll relearn that, he said quietly. My mother exhaled a long breath, like something old leaving her body. I won't promise with words anymore, she said. I'll promise with when I arrive. Chloe smiled faintly. Send me the dates that matter, she said. I'll be there. Even late, I'll still come. After dinner, they wandered around the apartment. On the wall hung my graduation tassel and a printed copy of my speech, typed on handmade paper, from the empty chair to the open mic. In the corner rested the wooden chair I'd moved there, its oak smooth, the small sign hanging from its back, "For who shows up." My mother touched the chair as if it were a monument. My father stared at his reflection in the framed speech, blurred by time. Chloe took a photo. She didn't post it. Just saved it to an album called Things to Remember. When they left, the hallway smelled faintly of hotel soap and rain. I handed my mother her coat. My father reminded Chloe to wear her scarf. No one said, "It's all fixed now," because we knew better. I only said, "Next week, I'm giving a small talk at the Cambridge Community Center." Not TEDx, just something for first years. 7 p.m. My mother hesitated, then asked, "Should we come early to get seats?" It was the first right question she'd ever asked me. "Early is good," I smiled. "Bring a warm coat." When the door closed, the apartment felt empty, but not hollow. I washed the dishes slowly, the water tapping like a quiet metronome for a new rhythm of family, slower, truer, present. Before turning off the lights, I straightened the frame, brushed a finger over the tassel, and rested my hand on the wooden chair. It was still empty, but no longer lonely. It was an invitation. Some people will come, some never will. But the chair will always stay there, as a quiet rule in my life. Those who show up will have a place. If you're hearing this somewhere on a train, in your kitchen, or in a city that doesn't yet know your name, remember this: you don't need to be chosen to have worth. Don't wait for someone to pull out a seat at a table that never called for you. Build your own chair, from the wood of effort, the nails of patience, and the paint of kindness. Then, when you're steady, pull up more chairs for those who deserve a place beside you. I keep that sign in my home as a reminder, for who shows up. What sign would hang above your chair? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to hear your stories.